Hi, Jamie Austin with The Real Estate of Mine. Welcome back to our podcast where we get real about real estate. Today I have a very special guest with me, Jonathan Nicholas. He's actually, it's kind of a favorite of mine in the industry because he was my team leader at my office at Keller Williams in Newport Beach Estates. And I had a myriad of offices that I could have gone to, but I chose this office particularly because of him. This is a gentleman that when we sat down, it was an instant simpatico, and we sort of understood we have a wealth of knowledge of the business of being in it for so long. Like we're sort of kind of, I won't say dinosaurs because that has a connotation that's not positive. But what I do want to say is like being in the business for this long really makes a difference these days.
Absolutely.
And now that the market has shifted so incredibly, it's going to pay to hire somebody that knows what they're doing and has experience and has actually weathered several markets of ups and downs and several cycles. And so I brought Jonathan on because he's like amazing and has lived all over the country and has weathered several cycles. And so I brought him in to actually normalize the market. So welcome, Jonathan.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're absolutely
fellow dinosaur, I guess.
As long as we're not the T-Rex with short arms.
That means we just have lots of wisdom.
That is true. Lots of wisdom.
T-Rex short arms only count when someone presents the check, right?
That's true. That's right. That's right. So tell us a little bit about yourself so that we have a little bit of a frame of reference of where you come from, what you do, and what you're doing now.
Well, I was thinking about that today. I was like, how many years have I been in the real estate business? And is it a cool thing to say how many years you've been in the business, especially when I'm at the office and I get a resume in from somebody that was born in 2002, that wants to go to work, and I'm like, what in the world? But 37 years, got into the business very young, was actually from a family that was 5 generations of ministry. So it was expected I go off to seminary. When I came back, I'm like, well, how am I really going to pay the bills? Yeah. So I got into real estate and really have never looked back. It's been one of those careers that once you get in it, it's kind of like being at the firm. You can't get out, you know. So I've been in the business for all these years and have probably held just about every role. Whether that's being an agent, a property manager, a broker of an office, also built one of the largest property management concerns in the southwest part of the United States, had over 3,000 properties I managed for a number of years. That was during the RTC years. Wow. Remember that?
Yeah.
That goes way back to, recessions back. Yeah. And then turned around, all of a sudden became the biggest listing company in town because I had all of those homes under management.
Yeah,
so
amazing.
That put us to the top of the chart, sold that company and went more corporate. And I've been more on the corporate consulting side of the business now since I would say mid-90s.
Wow. And it's amazing too, because actually what you find sort of with real estate tends to be sort of that second career. I knew it was for me. Yes. I was on camera doing in front of the camera things, commercials, television, film, whatever, for 25 years. Mm-hmm. And then same too, I was like, I'm really tired of the auditioning process. So what am I going to do now? Right. And turned into real estate. But for you, years young, you got into it really young, and it's made a difference. I mean, I think for people, if they started out really young, giving the education and knowing what we know now, wow, man, it's a career that can be sort of unlimited.
Well, even starting out young, wisdom is, I guess, wasted on the young. Yeah. So getting into the business, I look back at it and I go, wow, if I'd only kept that first rental property and I bought when I was 18 years old.
Exactly.
Wow, if I'd only bought, oh my goodness, and look at the prices. And we'll talk about some of that, what's going on in the market. But it would just been incredible to have all of that wealth, But we were buying and selling. We were playing the game. We were playing the game of Monopoly in real life. Yeah. And look where we are today.
Absolutely. So that is a perfect lead into the next question. So tell us what you are seeing in the market today.
Oh, my goodness. I think back to when would be a similar time that we've been exposed to not only the market variables that we have right now, but also just the market velocity, the want, the need, the demand of the consumer. And what a year this last year has been. I mean, we came out of the pandemic, which starved everybody's appetite for real estate, right? Yeah. And then coming out of that, well, all of a sudden we see all this demand, and we were immediately thrust into a market where we had people that were paying more than what they had ever thought that they would be willing to pay.
That's
but
right.
We're happy to do it because of the competition. It was like going to an auction, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. I know firsthand. It was. Yeah. Every offer I placed, there was no less than probably 14 to 20 offers per person for every single property.
Exactly.
And it was exhausting.
Yes.
Exhausting.
So it was the frenzy that you would have in a bidding situation, except we're out in front of the house bidding and holding up our number,
Exactly.
right? But it was still the emotions, and so
Yeah.
people just kept going higher and higher and higher, and I really didn't know when that was going to end. But I will tell you that there was a dynamic, a shift around the 15th. Kind of funny, around the same time tax day came
The 15th
around.
of April, yes, in case you don't know, yeah.
So right about then is when we saw the peak.
Yeah.
And now we're starting to see the market go backwards. But I will tell you, there's a lot of people waiting on the sidelines right now that are saying, oh, I'm going to jump in there when the market goes
it
backwards.
crashes,
Oh,
yeah.
When it crashes. When is it going to be? And you see all the headlines, right?
Yep, and you do, and it's not going to happen.
Exactly right.
I think the other thing that's really interesting to point out, too, is that the pandemic really was an interesting factor, and it played into, at least in the state of California, the supply chain issues of construction, new construction. They pretty much put a moratorium on building or even getting to finish the projects they had already started before the pandemic hit. And then it was like, God forbid, you're waiting and waiting for materials to come in. And then when materials did come in, the prices that they doubled and tripled.
Exactly.
So it was even just the cost of building was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then once that kind of eased up a little bit and we kind of figured out where our footing was, we were already behind in inventory, and then we got even further behind. So you're right. The demand was driving the market, and it was literally, and it was insane. I call it was insanity.
Yes.
I mean, it really was. For like 2020 to 21, it was crazy.
Yeah. It's called being in demand. And if you look back over the 10 years, 2 decades leading up to this, right? So 2000 to 2010, what do we have happen in that decade?
The crash, yeah.
Yeah, so we had the crash, and then you had all the builders that were a little bit scared to get out there and really do what they were doing before. So that decade, 2010 to 2020, all of a sudden caused a shortage because the builders, they were behind 5 to 10 million homes.
Yep.
So if we'd had extra 10 million homes, we wouldn't have had the pricing. Like
Exactly.
We had
And the thing to note that's different about this particular situation is the crash that was 2008 was literally a subprime rate loan driven crash.
Yes.
This is not the same market.
Right.
Those are not the same factors. The housing market is not driving the potential recession, and it's not driving the housing market crash. It's not doing any of that. So what we have is we have buyers that had waited, they were waiting. They were smart. They just continued to save and kept saving. And banks got on board and understood that, hey, we can't just lend to anybody and everybody that has a breath that's breathing. We got to make sure they have jobs and they can qualify and all that good stuff. So even the loan parameters have changed to where the buyers that are out there and ready to go that might have missed out just by sheer competition and price being driven up, they're still on the sidelines waiting for a product that they can afford, that they can get into the market.
Absolutely. It was one of the benefits of the pandemic is that household wealth went up, right? And we hadn't seen that in a number of years.
Yeah.
So that did create that opportunity, and that probably created more demand as a result. More people were jumping into the market as a result of that. But yeah, it's a totally different dynamic. And if you put that in perspective, what you said about the funding and how it was driven by, predatory lending and things like that, think back, anybody that owns a home now, whatever you paid for that, let's just say you paid $1 million just to make it easy. You didn't owe $1 million. You owed $1.2 million.
Easily.
Because you were borrowing the extra $200,000 to fund your life and your lifestyle the furniture and the updates and everything else. So think about that today. We don't have that capability of doing that. So maybe we owe $900,000 on that. So it is a different dynamic. So we don't have underwater mortgages like we did. I mean, there is an element of that in any economy, I think 3 to 6%, but there you go. We're in a different time today. So it is interesting to see. But as we come back down now, everybody's looking for that time,
Right.
Well, number one, people want to time the market, right?
Never do that. Doesn't even like Gary Keller's like you want to time the market and you're not a soothsayer.
Right.
Nobody can time the market, and by the time you time the market, you've timed out of the market and you've missed it.
Yeah.
And I hear that time and time again.
Exactly.
So the time is now. The time is absolutely now, and always is usually now.
Always is now. Exactly right. So it doesn't matter when you just jump into the market. But so if you look back in the crystal ball, which is looking back in the rearview mirror right now,
absolutely, it is
to the 15th of April. So all we're doing is coming down from the hype.
Yes.
Right?
We're normalizing it, is what I said.
Normalizing. Good word.
Yeah.
Good word. So if the peak was 10, 20, in some markets 30% above what the normal price would be.
Right.
We've got to go backwards
Yep.
10, 20, 30% to
yep.
get back to the market value,
Yep.
which doesn't mean we went negative in that market value. So if you're out there and you're looking for, that $200,000 less than market value, sorry, it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Yeah, it's just, it's not realistic. And that's the thing. And this is why I wanted you on, is because I know you have enough perspective to actually normalize the market. Because people get so caught up in the hype and like, oh my God, sellers were just like, oh, I'm going to put it on for whatever. And I know that somebody's going to be stupid enough to give me whatever I want.
Right.
And even if it's there were sellers at a time even when I was writing offers last summer, they were like, we're just not going to look at anything that's not $300,000 over asking. And then I'm like, well, then you should have listed it at $300,000 over asking.
Right.
And you would have cut out the friends and you would have seen who was really real and who was maybe willing to pay it or maybe not.
Right.
Exactly
right. We had a seller just recently that we had a home listed, and I think the list price was, suggested by our agent, our listing agent, said, oh, I'm thinking 1.9, 1.95. That's going to be where you are. Seller, what do they want to list it at?
Oh, 2.5.
I think they were wanting like 2.4, right?
Yeah.
And they came down and were willing to take 2.2, so let's put it on the market at 2.2 against the advice of the listing agent. All of the offers came in, within the first week, just like they would in any normal market. The average of which was 1.9, 1.95. Now, a year ago, you might have gotten 2.35.
You might have.
Or 2.4.
But
You
not
don't know.
now.
Yeah.
Not
so
now.
here's the funny side of that. The seller is also a buyer because they have to go somewhere too.
So then they want the discount on that side, but they didn't want it on the upfront of selling their home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're out there looking and they're wondering why they can't find a home where these sellers will be more reasonable and not be asking for 2.2, 2.3, 4, whatever. Yes.
Yeah.
So turn it around if the shoe fits. In other words,
Yeah.
walk a mile in someone else's shoes but yet still can't make that connection.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I think it's going to be a shorter time frame now
I
if they want to move stuff. So how do you dispel fears of purchasing or selling in this market? This is also kind of a little bit about what we were touching on. So how do you dispel the fears? Because it's like we want to normalize the market, and people, like you said, are like, oh, I'm going to hold on and I'm going to time the market and then I'm going to jump in. And the truth is like I'm telling clients today, now is the time to jump in because even though his rates are probably higher, they are higher than they've been in the last decade or so. The truth of the matter is they're still lower historically overall as an average.
Yes.
And then you let the market kind of cool down a little bit and then you refinance.
Right.
But at least by that time you're not throwing rent money away and you've been building equity.
Right. Exactly right. Well, I think back to that first rental home at 18 years old.
Yeah.
Interest rate of 18%.
18%. People would just freak out at that.
So you think back, I think to answer that question, you have to ask yourself some questions. And so the number one question I would ask myself is, how long do I intend on living in that property, right?
Yep, great question.
Or how long do I intend on holding that property, even if I'm going to rent it out later?
Yep.
And today, knowing what I know, 30 years, 37 years, I probably would never sell a home again because I would want to create, additional wealth for myself. Another good question to ask yourself would be, if you're not old enough and you haven't, owned property or you're younger at this, ask your mom, ask your dad, what did you all pay for your home?
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. What did you pay for your home when you bought it?
And they probably can do that because they're living back with their parents. Because they can't afford to live anywhere else. So mom and dad at dinner time is a lot more probable situation these days.
We call that boomerang families, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So you ask your mom and dad. I can remember, just as an analogy, my mom and dad moved to the LA area. Dad was with American Airlines at the time. They were so upset that they had to pay so much money. The most they had ever paid for a home in their marriage, in their life, it was $27,000. Wow. 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2 living area, 2,400 square feet, on a nice big lot. And that $27,000 in 1971, right? I was just a wee little child. But in 1971, by 1979, that's all through the oil embargo, the energy crisis, Nixon administration, Carter administration, Ford, all of that. Yeah. And we saw real estate in most markets across the United States triple in value.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating?
Yeah. So if you look at that and you go, okay, well, that's, $78,000 and $80,000 and $90,000. They had gotten a opinion of value in 1979. It was $125,000.
Whoa! So you think that $27,000 was a pretty safe investment?
Very good investment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you do that today? Well, we're not in the same market dynamics as far as inflation, even though inflation as of yesterday is 9.1%.
Ooh, yeah.
Right. But I don't think we're going to see in this decade a home value triple. Right. But if I was able to make 20 or 30% last year on my money.
You do it all day long.
Exactly right. So let's take somebody that bought a home, and there was an example of such in Costa Mesa just recently. We were looking up on the tax rolls where we found a homeowner that had been in the home since the 1950s. So this homeowner had paid $15,000 or $12,000 for this home. It was a nice size home. So today that home's worth $1.1 million or so. Right. So if I took an average over the last 50 years and they had a $20,000 increase in value every year for those 50 years, I would guarantee you that at least 20 of those years, the appreciation outgrew their own income.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there is something to be said about long-term hold. So getting into the market, you've just got to get a foothold.
Yep, absolutely. That's what I tell people all the time. Yeah. Just get in.
Get in.
So get in. And then it was funny because I was having a conversation with another client just this morning, and he was bringing a situation to me. I've got friends of mine who've lived in this beautiful home in Brentwood, California. Their kids are outgrown. The house is now too big. They don't want to. And then everybody still has that same question. Well, I can't go anywhere because what do? I can't afford taxes in the new places. Well, yes, you can. The state of California passed Prop 19, which they combined two other earlier referendums, Prop 6090, and what they did is they now made Prop 19, which will allow you to sell your property, downsize, or go to a property of equal or lesser value and transfer the same tax basis.
Right.
Wow, that is a game changer.
Yes, it is.
It used to, you could only do it once. Now Prop 19, they made it to where you could do it actually 3 more times. And the caveat is that you have to be 55 or older.
Yes, yeah.
But what a game changer.
Absolutely.
Especially in this market, because taxes in California are historically high, and that's the hesitation. People are like, "No, I'm stuck here." No, you're not actually stuck here. And if you decide that you want a smaller place, but maybe it's a little bit more expensive than what the value is that you're selling, then they adjust the tax basis for that extra. Right. So you still get most of your transfer of your tax basis, but they will make an adjustment for the overage. Yes. That is such powerful information to have.
A lot of families are using that as an estate planning tool as
Absolutely.
well right now,
Absolutely.
So, and I'm seeing that happen quite often. There's a little bit of paperwork and a little bit of filing you've got to do to be able to get that passed through, but to be free now and go to another county or go to a lower cost of living area is
Absolutely.
huge. And I really would commend you for knowing about it, because you would not believe the number of real estate professionals that I talk to, not with our company, that don't know it passed.
Yeah.
That actually will argue the point and go,
oh
no,
my
no,
God.
that didn't pass.
Like I use it all the time because it's most of California. I see a lot of these people came in the 70s and they're just like they bought in like Playa del Rey when it was just celery fields in Marina del Rey, a little bit of beach, and they bought their home in 1970. It's now a $2.5 million house and they bought it for $100,000.
Exactly.
And they're like, well, I can't go anywhere. And I'm like, oh, yes, you can. And you don't have to carry this 5-bedroom, 3,000 square foot house.
Right.
You know, there's options for you.
Yep.
So I love being able to help people with that. And it's also, again, a perspective of the market that people didn't know about. And it used to be Los Angeles, San Bernardino County, and restricted counties. Now it's the whole state of California.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's really great.
If you think about that, I mean, there's a certain percentage of the market right now that's not doing anything because of the fear-based thinking.
Absolutely.
So that's one example. The other would be the long-term investor.
Yeah, exactly.
Capital gains.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but there are tools for both of those situations, and there's solutions. So if you're out there and you owe a lot of money, or not owe a lot of money, you have a lot of equity, I should say, and you want to get out of an investment, certainly there's a way to do it.
1041 tax exchange, 1031 tax exchange.
That's DSTs are the other new instrument that's out there right now, the Delaware Statutory trust. And those are allowing people to do some creative things that maybe have not been tested in the courts, but there's a number of I guess, what do you call that when there's an example that's already been done, when the precedent's been set.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's giving a lot of investors a lot of ways to get out of things as well.
Fantastic. So moving into what I know probably is very current and what is on people's minds, how do you think a recession and inflation is going to affect the housing market? It already is, but I just wanted to hear your take on it.
Well, definitely, you've already said, cost of goods, services, labor is causing an impact right now in the state of California. Somewhere around 42% plus of the cost of building a new home is all regulation based. So that's why we have an expensive real estate market, one reason, and the demand as well. So inflation is going to affect all of that, everything from the brick to the siding, the sheetrock to whatever it is, the cost of gypsum, all that kind of stuff. So that's already having impact. That inflation will also have an impact on the ongoing appreciation as well. Right now, according yesterday, 9.1% inflation. Out of that, somewhere around 25 or 26% of our total inflation is housing cost.
Wow.
Shelter.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's going to be something that we contend with for probably the next 2 years, I would say. But it's interesting. At the start of every recession, you've got inflation a little bit, and then you've also got a higher interest rate. And so what's happening now, I just heard they're looking at a 0.75 point increase.
Ooh, yep.
That's a huge increase.
That's a huge increase. And by the way, just to, I was telling this also to a client. If the Feds raise the interest rate 0.75%, that's quite a hike. But it doesn't necessarily. It's not parallel and instantaneous with the housing interest rate increases. So there are markers that the banks and lenders will look at. So yes, they will be increasing as well. But just because the Feds have increased at 0.75% doesn't mean that you're going to look at it and see suddenly that home buying purchasing loans are suddenly jumped at 0.75% as well. Sometimes the loan market and some of the lenders that we've worked with, they've already been anticipating these increases.
Right.
So they have already been building these into the prices of the loans. Right. Is my understanding.
Well, it'd be like the airlines that buy gas 2 years prior, jet fuel.
Yep.
So they've already priced it. So the market, mortgage market itself, is its own independent market. You've got investor monies that are out there that are pulled together. It's not like they're going to go to the Fed and say, let us borrow money so we can loan it to Joe over here that wants to buy a new home.
Exactly.
So they're not going to be buying it at the same price. So, and those investors right now are actually out there saying, we want our percentage, our fair share of the market.
Yep.
And so they're offering incentives right now out to the public. So whether you want to buy down the rate or whether you want to get into some other,
you'll see that a lot with new construction developments. They're offering, they want to keep their products in home. Use their lenders, and the lenders usually in those new construction developments are like, we'll buy down your rate for you. So any way they can get in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
What I'm not seeing this time around, which I am anxious to see, because any investor that was ever out there and was worth his, his milk, basically, in getting out there and creating wealth, is creative financing. I'm not seeing that as much. But as we see the rates go up, if we do have more impact on that, let's say we get close to 6%.
Yep.
That's still historically very low, but you're going to see some people that will probably offer some lease purchase, some owner carryback, some seller financing, things like that. I can remember I bought a couple of homes way back then in the 80s where it was sweat equity, but it was shared equity. So I had somebody else that would come in, was the lender and the bank, but also a owner.
Interesting.
Until you paid that person off and got them off the loan. So there are ways. There's always a way.
Yeah. And I agree with you. What's interesting, because I've been working with some clients currently, and what I'm hearing from the lenders is they're kind of they're squeezing. They're squeezing the tights, the perimeters with which they can work. And there was a little bit more flexibility earlier in the year, but now they're kind of seeing with inflation and recession, they're kind of squeezing, down their requirements. But again, like you said, you can't be Debbie Downer. You just can't be, because there's always a solution.
That's right.
So, and again, it's like the time is now, get in now.
Right.
You have to also kind of put aside the bad news bears kind of news that you get, right?
Exactly
you just got to turn it off.
Yep.
And you're right. Once you figure out how long you're going to be in there, and what I say to clients, like, first of all, if this is like an entry level home and this is your first purchase, this is not going to be your be all end all home. It's just not. You got to wrap your head around that.
That's right.
You got to wrap your head around what the goal is that you're trying to get into the market. get some equity, and then take that equity and leverage that to the next place, which is why I also really love helping my clients build wealth through their real estate portfolio, because I don't see it as a one transaction and then we're done. I see it as a stepping stone process, right? To get more and more and more. And then hopefully at a certain place, we're at a place where we're talking about 1031 exchanges where you can leverage and defer your tax basis so that you can keep buying up and up and up and more and just diversifying your portfolio.
Right.
So let me see, what else have I got? So are you seeing any trends that you haven't seen before in this cycle? One you just mentioned, you're not seeing the creative financing that you would have thought you would have seen. What else is maybe not occurring to you that you wish you were seeing?
We're certainly not seeing the people go out there and buy multiple properties. There was the REITs, remember, that came in during 2009, 2010, were buying entire subdivisions.
Do you know what the REITs an acronym is? I think it's Real Estate
Investment Trust.
Real Estate Investment Trust, yeah.
Right. So you have a lot. Blackstone Group was a big one. Back when I had a radio show years ago, I had a lot of those CEOs on, and they were going to Memphis and Jackson, Mississippi, and all these places that the average investor wouldn't think of.
Right.
And they were doing turnkey investments, buying 1,000 homes up and then turning those all into rentals and then turning over to any investor and saying, here's 10 homes for you, all cash flowing. I'm not seeing that, but they are out there looking, and we suspect over the next 2 years that there's going to be a good investment opportunity.
And a real estate owned investment trust, right? And so the difference with those are projects where you make an investment, but it's with a limited caveat time frame. Right. It's like you're in and you're out. Like it might be 7 to 10 years, but then you're out. So it's not a long hold. It's like you've put the money in, they've gotten what they need, they turn it into a rental, then once they're good, they make their investment back, then they pay their investors back, and then they're out, and then you're on to the next thing.
And the largest ones are stock purchase. They're supported by, because they're a publicly traded company. So we're not seeing that element in there. We're not seeing people buying up and going for the 5 or 10 or 15 and creating wealth that way. Those opportunities haven't presented themselves like they did in the last market, because remember, you had people that were underwater, and then you had short sales, remember? And
yes, I'm certified in those. I think those might come around again a little bit.
They will be. Yeah. I really do. We'll see that probably, I guess, double. I think right now we're somewhere around 4 or 5% of the market. We might see that, go up to maybe 8 or 9% of the market. So there are going to be agents that are looking for that information, and consumers.
Yeah, and I tell you what, it was a really eye-opening education for me, because usually I was the listing agent on all of those transactions. And what was interesting is I would deal with the seller for the first minuscule 10 minutes of finding the buyer, and then I was dealing with a bank, period. Sometimes a first bank and a second bank, and sometimes in Ohio and wherever. So when you would do what they call a BPO, which is a broker price opinion, it was interesting because they were like, there's no way you're getting $500,000 in Echo Park. And I'm like, oh, yes, we are. So I'd have to really educate them on the real estate in the area, and we'd use an appraiser or whatever. But it was really interesting. And I'm like, this is why you're paying me to do what I'm doing, right? Exactly. And it was a very one-sided transaction. And they actually had, as honest to goodness, facts. 75 to 100 pages to the bank.
Isn't that crazy? You
couldn't scan it. You couldn't email it back then. I was like, God, I hope they've changed that. I was like, oh, that's crazy. That was an hour of my day that I never got back.
Well, if you think about anybody that's looking at being an investor, and not just real estate, but let's say you want to go into the stock market, the mindset that you have as a first-time investor is somewhat similar to the mindset that a first-time real estate buyer or investor would have as well. They're afraid, and they're going to be monitoring that price just like you would on the stock market. And if it starts going backwards, sell. Right. But the seasoned investor is in it for the long term.
Haul.
That's exactly right. So be that person.
Yeah.
And let's look at it from that perspective.
And also, if you are going to be purchasing your first time investment property, just 10 years ago, things that have come on board now, people are looking at short-term rentals. That wasn't as much of a thing, and now it really is, because that's a way to... It always used to be, I'm going to get an investment property and then fill it with, a long-term... the goal was to find a golden long-term tenant. And now people are turning and burning Airbnbs, VRBOs, and they're like, whoa, I can make my mortgage payment and then some in a short amount of time. And so that has become a whole other market up there. But it's wonderful. It's so there's options out there. So it's just about how to get creative and figure out what you want to do.
Yep, that's true.
As a whole, interesting perspective, at least what I'm learning too. And of course, I had to, as a broker, I have to redo my license every 4 years, and so I have to take new courses. And what was interesting is I took a class on for my education and for my certification on millennials. And so historically, we're kind of ebbing out of the baby boomer, generation where like the older you got, the more status you had in society meant you had a bigger house, right? The bigger, the better area. And what we're finding is that really it's shifting because millennials are going to be the largest pool of buyers for the next 25 years. And they're just not going anywhere. And their focus is very different in that they prize mobility and flexibility and green over status, large living. Would you agree?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Now, back when we started looking at those trends, probably in the early 2000s, generational identities, we used to have a course at the National Association of Realtors that we taught on that. And the difference between the baby boomer, the Dynasty Dallas, melodramas, the champagne, caviar wishes, champagne dreams.
Absolutely.
That defines that generation. And then we saw the Gen X behind that.
Along with shoulder pads and big hair.
That's true. It did, yes. Everything's bigger.
I was
in
a little
Texas.
victim of that myself. A little bit. But that could be because I was from Texas too. So.
The Rooster Trail. Don't tell me you had one of those.
I did not. Did not. I was like, no, didn't have that.
So when we look at those generations that were being raised by those people, and they saw the excess, they saw us go through a depression, a recession, and all of that. All of a sudden, there is a different perspective as to how am I going to spend my money, and that really has affected the millennials. And there was one group that began calling them the subscription generation. So it's not necessarily bad to rent.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm subscribing no different than I do to any product that I subscribe to. It's a monthly rent, as long as I can do the analysis and show that it would cost me more money to buy as far as what my wealth creation is. So,
but
that's
if we flip that on its side, though, with the inflation and recession, what we're finding is that even rents are increasing.
Oh, they're
out of control. So like, whereas what I'm also hearing, like even clients that said, you know what, I'm gonna step out. I had a couple clients say I'm gonna step out from last summer. I'm just gonna wait and see what the market does. I heard that a lot. And then there were other people just, I gotta get in. So I helped all of those that had to get in, and it was a very strong year, a very bullish year. And then the ones that step back, they're like, oh, I'll just rent for a few months. And then at the end, when they realized it might have been, they kind of missed the window. They were like, holy moly, like just renting is now what I was paying on my first 2 mortgages.
Exactly.
And I was like, exactly.
Right.
At least locally here in Los Angeles, it happens to be one of the highest rent increases. And just West Coast overall tends to be on the higher end, as on the higher end East Coast like New York and Miami. Like I think it was an average of $1,700 per month, and now it's over $2,400-$2,500 a month for a 1-bedroom.
Yeah, the 1-bedrooms in LA County and Orange County are starting somewhere around $2,600-$2,700 now. So that's huge. And then you go to a 2-bedroom and you're in the threes and fours.
Easy.
Yeah, it's crazy. So what has happened with this subscription generation is now co-living, communal living. So think of a hostel. That's one kind of.
I really tried not to.
I know, exactly. My back especially. And then you look at, there's the luxury version of that, to where we saw this happen in investment real estate, where the REITs were building student housing back in the early 2000s, where they would go in and put in an apartment complex in. They would be 4-bedroom suites with a common living room, kitchen, and those suites all were keyed off separately. So the student, instead of being in a dorm room, now has a bedroom, bathroom, ensuite with a key, and then they can come and go. And so we're seeing that now. Large management companies in LA are now creating an opportunity to do the same thing for adults. So you have a 4-bedroom, gorgeous apartment in a mid-rise building with the elevator, the underground parking, all the amenities that you would have. They'll come in and have their interior decorators do up the room for you. So the
Wow.
bed, the flat screen TV, the kitchenette, the coffee bar in your room, just like you would be in a little suite in a hotel. It's what it
Yeah.
feels like is a hotel.
Yeah.
And now the cost of that is starting at $1,300 to about $2,000 a month. And think times 4 for the investor that owns it.
That's a lot of money.
He's making $8,000.
Whereas he
maybe.
could have just been making 4. Half
Exactly right. So
Yeah.
see, that goes back to what we said earlier. There's always a way.
that. Always a way. Isn't that
always a way.
interesting? And I was thinking when you were saying that about the rooms off, like it. People are sacrificing space now.
Yes.
They are.
Yeah.
It's like there's limited building opportunities anymore, so they've had to get creative with
Yeah,
it.
I think it was Bill Burnett, the comedian I love, Bill Burr, right? He was talking about that and talking about tiny homes. And he goes, "Come on," he goes, "we used to call that a mobile home." And it's true.
And
but-
it's funny, in the pandemic, I went down the tiny home rabbit hole. And I was telling my husband, I was like, we should really look into this. And he was like, are you crazy? And I said, no, think about it. If you get a plot of land,
Exactly.
a big piece of land, and then you put 9 tiny homes on it, then we have a compound with our adult friends who, when we retire, we've got a place to go. We could rent it out, but it's private.
Right.
And then we could have, like a community center, a garden, somebody to watch the grounds for us, and then we can rent it out the rest of the time. But like, it doesn't sound as crazy. And then when I was thinking, and you could also add wheels on it and pick it up and move it. But, most of the time, if it's a permanent structure, you just need a concrete base.
Yes.
But you leave a less carbon footprint.
Right.
And do you really need that much space, or are you more interested in being able to go to 5 other places and share that? So I think we're going to see a really big shift, because I was saying, because I like my space. I mean, coming from Texas, like, we have a space, wide space, and I was really used to that. And then like I was like, could I do a tiny home? And then we started looking at boats, like catamarans. Could you really pare down your life into like 2 drawers?
Right.
And I was like, you know what? You probably could. Like, after a while, stuff just becomes kind of stuff.
It's true.
So the flexibility of that and the lifestyle of like, yeah, maybe I'll live on my boat and travel all over the world, and I don't need a home or a home base.
Right.
This is my home base.
That nomadic traveler, the freedom, all of that, that's what appeals. There's a high school up in Turlock, Northern California, that their wood shop, for the guys that were ever in wood shop, growing up, they actually build tiny homes as
That's
a high school
amazing.
project. They
That
sell them
is
for $17,500.
Oh my God, run, don't walk. And some people are even just putting a tiny home in their backyard.
Right, exactly.
As
right.
opposed to like an ADU, like converting a garage, which could be $75,000 to $150,000. You just put the little tiny home in the backyard,
Exactly
and
right.
it's $200 to $400. I mean, when you get up to like 400 square feet, that's a grand tiny
Yeah,
home.
exactly right.
But 180 to
McMansion.
200, yeah, McMansion, a tiny McMansion. But I've seen some that were outstanding, where they made the indoor-outdoor space.
Right.
Where they just built a huge deck with, sails overhead and shade and another outdoor living area, and yet the cost of it was $200,000 as opposed to $2 million.
Right.
So
yeah.
I guess it just really depends on your focus. But I said to somebody, I said, I'm open to all of it, because it's going to be an interesting thing to see
Right.
where we're headed for sure.
I agree.
Let me make sure we covered everything. Do you see a need for? And this, I always love this conversation. Do you see a need for agents going away? I mean, I know my personal answer, but there's a lot of companies that are coming out there like, we'll save you money in commission. We've automated everything. It's one stop, just drop your photos, do this, and everything is uploaded to the internet. We will sell your house with no hassle, no whatever, which sort of does take away what we as agents and brokers do. And my experience is every time that has happened, they always say, oh, God, I wish I had my real estate agent, because they were so valuable to me. So what's
Right.
your take on that?
I would agree with you 100%. So you look at EFTs, all of the new ways that things are going to be bought, escrow companies now being able to do everything digitally in the future,
Yes.
being able to broker an entire transaction. People are doing it already with cars, high-end artwork and stuff like that. So there will be a way. There's always going to be a way, right?
Yep.
So there will be that pure technology-driven transaction. But after that transaction, when that new buyer is in their home and enjoying it, and then something happens, do they ring up the technology? Do they reach back out for advice?
Good point. Yeah.
Where is the human element?
Yeah.
And so having the consultant, the expert,
Yes.
the person that's weathered the storm 2 or 3 times before, like a Jamie, that could be there to help you, but also figuring out what are your true needs, being able to be that consultant and really ask the right leading questions and get to know what it is that you're looking for. That is irreplaceable. And I think that there will always be a human element at the center of the transaction. Now, if it is purely transactional,
Right.
and I am just buying to amass wealth, and it's going to be for a long-term hold, and I don't really care where and what school district, and I don't need to know that the west side of the street sells for on average $125,000 more than the
than the
east
east
side
side.
of the street, and I don't need to know that the split floor plan is going to sell at a 15% discount. See, these are things that are held in the brains of,
That's right. Of us.
yes, exactly right. And so there's always going to be a need for that. So I really think it's going to be, if you're looking at building a portfolio and you're looking for someone to be with you every step of the way and to be the confidant, the advisor, the advocate for you, you need to have an agent.
And I think, too, what I've said to somebody, I had a friend of mine that had sold a place, and I was not involved because it was prior to us knowing each other. But what they found out is that they thought it was just completely transactional, and it turned out that the house opened up a can of worms with mold and what they could actually build. They didn't really do the deep dive in the permits to know what they were really getting into and what limitations they had in making those repairs and changing the structure of the place. That would have been something that a real estate agent and broker like myself could have helped with. And so they ended up losing out about, I think it was like $400,000 to $500,000 because of that. So I think you're going to have to understand, just like you said, is it purely transactional and or like having an advocate that could help you potentially save money or at least get to know what your needs are long-term, not just short-term, but long-term, and then have somebody with you every step of the way.
Well, algorithm's not going to do that for you.
That's right.
Case in point, company last year started buying across the nation, started billions of dollars in real estate, a very technology-driven company, and ends up paying way more than all the homes were worth and ends up costing their shareholders billions of dollars. And we won't say the name of the company, but that is, in my mind, a perfect example of if you're buying based on an algorithm,
right,
and you have no access or no clue as to what the local market is. Our textbooks in real estate are full of examples of agents and companies having to buy homes back from consumers because they didn't know the local area. So agent A went from downtown Chicago, I'll say, and sells a home that's 30 miles out because she didn't want to lose that consumer, and sells that consumer a home that is in an area that is surrounded by snakes. This is an actual real life situation in Illinois that is one of the stories that are told in liability classes. So the agent goes out there and, I've got the same license. It's just 30 miles away. It's got to be a house. We'll do the inspections. We'll be protected. People move in there, find out that area is known for a certain type of snake that just goes everywhere. Yes. And so when the new homeowner is out there walking the neighborhood and they start hearing all the other neighbors say, oh yeah, well that's what this area is known for. Your agent should have told you that.
If I had known that, I would have hightailed it out of there so fast.
Exactly. That agent ended up buying the home back.
Wow. Fascinating.
Yeah. So there you go. Having an agent that knows what they're doing.
And in this market, especially because now that things are starting to change and turn and shift, what we're going to find out is the agents that got in the business when things were really easy and bullish and you maybe stuck a sign in the yard and sold it with not much fare, they're now going to find out that it really pays to have someone that knows what they're doing.
Exactly right.
Because those guys are going to be out of the market very soon. So we always expect that. When it's really high on the hog and it's really easy, we get a lot of new real estate agents flood the market. And then when things get a little topsy-turvy and they have to really buckle down and do work, they don't know what to do, to continue to get business. And B, they've just not really weathered it enough to know how to guide their client expertly enough to get them through the storm.
Right. Exactly.
So it's all about perspective for
sure.
sure.
It is. It totally is. You wouldn't do all of your stock investing or grow your own portfolio, no matter what type of investment you have, without the counsel of
That's
a
right.
certified financial planner or somebody like that is worth, their weight in gold. So
absolutely.
Same thing with having a real estate agent.
I love it. Jonathan, you've been amazing. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Anything that you thought, maybe we didn't cover or anything? I mean, we covered quite a bit.
No, we did cover quite a bit. I would just say, the message here is you just got to jump into real estate. Right?
I love
you
it.
gotta
Yes.
Jump in, get your foothold. Think about mom and dad, use that as an example for yourself. Look at all of the appreciation that happened. And I think if you can just jump in there and get your start, you're going to be happy come 10 years from now, 15 years from now.
I love it. And if at all it fails, just keep playing Van Halen's Jump. And, just feel that. And it's true. It's what I say too. Just jump. Just get in there.
Yes.
Be fine. We'll land, and you got people like us looking out for you and got your back. So we'll make sure it happens.
Right.
Thank you guys for spending time with us today on Real Estate of Mind. And if you want to check me out, since I've got several places now, I've expanded my business from just LA to Orange County as well. Not leaving 25 years of living in Los Angeles behind, but expanding. So I even have more resources out in the Orange County area. Check us out at restateofmind.com. And from there, you can get to any one of our websites and check us out. And we also have a new YouTube channel on there. And UB and Go Network is just expanding. And so we're taking these podcasts and putting them on my YouTube channel with also little snippets of just some really great real estate information. Short and sweet. Yeah, short and sweet. That's how I like it. Till next time.